All right, folks, welcome to the Origins of Theater lecture for Intro to Theater. We're going to discuss the origins of theater in ancient Greece. We're going to touch a little bit upon Egyptian theater and also talk about the Romans as well, but we're going to mostly focus on the Greeks. So my first question is, what made theater an inevitability, right? What do you think it is? The instinct for storytelling, the idea of entertainment and myth-making, right? So those are some of the really humanistic qualities that helped theater develop, right? We as human beings love telling stories. I'm sure all of you have friends or family members that are just really great at telling stories. And stories kind of become part of your life and your ability to share and connect on a human level. There is also the idea of ritualistic worship, right? An act or series of actions designed to give significance to human events, right? Honoring moments. And a lot of these things focus on storytelling and retelling the story of an event that happened. And some of those are religious events and some of those are cultural events. But the idea to keep those stories alive is what ultimately led us to theater. If we go back to the first millennium B.C.E., the Egyptian civilization, we know that they had religious festivals. We have no evidence of their dramatic literature, meaning that we cannot pick up a play from the first millennium B.C.E. and read it or translate it from ancient Egyptian and then read it. We can do that with the Greeks. We can do that with the Romans. We know that they were doing these things and telling these long form stories, but we don't have the actual scripts. So these religious festivals were ceremonies that were performed once a year. It was a worship of the gods, one specific god in specific, and it told the story of that god. So the god that these plays were about was Osiris, the god of the underworld, the pharaohs, fertility, and agriculture. So all things that were important during this society's time. So the Abydos Passion Play is the story of Osiris, right? It's the story of betrayal and murder by Osiris's brother Seth, and ultimately the journey of his sister Isis to resurrect him. Osiris can be very directly correlated to Dionysus, one of the Greek gods, in terms of the way that the religious rituals within these cultures led to drama. So if we move to the ancient Greece, the beginnings of theater, tragedy literally translates to goat song, and that comes from the Dionysian followers. The Dionysian followers were disciples of Dionysus, and Dionysus was symbolized by the goat. His followers would do these long lyrical narrative poems known as a dithyrambic chorus, right? So a dithyramb is a lyrical narrative, and these choruses were long lyrical narrative poems. These rituals and these moments of worship really grew to become four major celebrations in Athens. They started off as the rural Dionysia, Liana, Anthesteria, and the city Dionysia. And what these ultimately ended up becoming, moving from the religious aspect to the secular aspect, was they became playwriting festivals where Greek playwrights would write the myths and the stories of these gods and their interactions with humans. So the city Dionysia started in 534 BCE. It was the most lavish. This one was open to all playwrights, non-Athenians. It was there were certain playwrights, play festivals and celebrations that were only open to Athenians. This one was the largest and was open to all playwrights in Greece. And it was a competition for the playwrights. It lasted 5 to 7 days. The first 2 days were usually for dithyrambic choruses. There were 3 days for tragedies and the satyr play, and then later days were added for comedy. Throughout these, eventually, right, we went from the chorus and this long lyrical narrative poem to actual drama. And that evolved slowly, but the first stop in this evolution was the leader of the chorus, or the choragus. They would sing one part of the song, and in response, the choratai, or the chorus, would then respond. We're not completely sure how the actor developed within this, but legend gives us insight that Thespis, a playwright at the city of Dionysia, stepped out of the dithyrambic chorus and started portraying the characters of the show, of the story, and started interacting with the chorus in a way that wasn't just call and response, but that was developing dialogue, one of the major elements of drama. That's where we get the term thespians, is from this legend that Thespis was the first actor within a Greek chorus. So the early tragedies had one actor to participate in dialogue with the chorus and the leader. And eventually, right, we initially had one actor playing against the chorus, playing many roles. It led to two actors and then finally three actors. But one of the very significant theatrical devices that allowed the Greeks to do this was the dramatic mask. The dramatic mask was very important to the development of theater. It allowed one man to play many, and it allowed men to play women because women were not allowed on stage at this time. There's also the idea that these masks helped with projection in that they had kind of a bullhorn built into them. The tragedies, right, were three of the types of plays, or there were three types of plays performed, tragedy being the greatest, but tragedy was the most popular, comedy, and then finally the satyr plays. Within Aristotle's Poetics, he talked very specifically about drama and dramatic literature, and the Poetics is kind of Aristotle's meditation on the arts. Within the Poetics, Aristotle wrote that tragedy is an imitation of an action that is whole, complete, and of a certain magnitude, right? So that tragedies were one large story that had weight. Within those stories, Aristotle wrote that four elements must be present for a tragedy to be an actual tragedy. The first element is there must be a tragic hero, an eminently good man, someone from the nobility. And this was important at this time because somebody falling from nobility really gave more weight to the story within the Greek culture. So seeing great men fall and be destroyed was very important within this world to make a tragedy a tragedy. That tragic hero must experience a catastrophe, a terrible event that is brought about as a result of the actions of the tragic hero, right? So that's really important, that the tragedy is brought forth by the tragic hero. It's their fault why things happen, right? And that can directly be related to the tragic hero's tragic flaw, right? So every tragic hero must experience a catastrophe and must have an identifiable tragic flaw, right? And this flaw of character, sometimes a strength, but ultimately causes the hero's downfall. And all of this results in the reversal of fortune, the revelation of the hero's downfall, and he must accept his fate at the end of the play. So that's tragic hero, catastrophe, tragic flaw, and then reversal of fortune. Those are the four elements that Aristotle said needed to be present in order for it to be a true tragedy. Within the Poetics, Aristotle says that the combination of these four things really will help the audience experience a catharsis or an emotional purging, right? The idea that we get so wrapped up in the story that when it's finally over, we're able to let out all of that tension. And we still see that in film and television today. Stories bring us to the edge of our seat and then kind of give us this breath, this weight to move away. Some of the things that could be felt through catharsis was the recognition of the fate of all humans and the human need to share experiences. Aristotle also wrote about his unities of time, place, character, and action, saying that good tragedies should take place in no more than 1 day's time, in one place only, with very specific characters and one single actionable plot. As you will read Oedipus, you'll see that there are not other plots. There is one plot that the story is focusing on for the whole time. The structure of tragedies can usually be broken into three parts. The prologue, this establishes the conflict, right? The episodes or agnons, which develops dramatic relationship with the characters, and the exodus or conclusion. This is very similar to how we mapped the plot in the first lecture, right? It's a little bit different. It doesn't have the four parts because they don't talk about the climax, but we have the exposition, the rising action, and then the conclusion. The Greeks didn't identify the climax as a major part of the structure, but it's definitely there. Between each of the sections, the chorus would sing songs or take these long lyrical narrative poems, and they had very specific movements that happened on stage as they were doing these choral odes. The parados was the moving onto the stage, so they'd be speaking as they came onto stage. The stasima was them standing still. The strophe as they moved from right to left, and then the antistrophe as they moved back to the right side of the stage. So those movements were developed throughout the choral odes. If we look at the development of the theater space, we still, again, go back to that dithyrambic chorus, because those dithyrambs, they danced in a circular area called the orchestra, right? So if you look at this image, you can see that the orchestra is down at the bottom, and the Greeks built their theaters into hillsides to create a natural amphitheater. And this space developed over hundreds of years. Early orchestras were arranged temporarily at the bottom of hills to accommodate large numbers of people. Temporary tents served as an area for keeping religious artifacts and entrances and exits. In the center of the orchestra, we can see what's called the thymale. It was an altar, because, again, these started as religious rituals. So the altar was there. As we moved to the amphitheater and it became a little more secular and less religious, the thymale moved proportionally and eventually out of view of the audience. The skene was added, which was the scene house. So you can see the skene right here, and it's a house-like structure for exits and entrance. And then the Proskenion is the actual acting place, right? So a raised stage in front of the skene was the acting space. The Theatron is the seeing place where the audience sat to view the action, right? These were carved into hillsides and seated thousands of people. And they had really great acoustics, which is one of the reasons why they performed them at the base of a hill. You can see some images from the Greek theaters that are still standing today. The Scenic Innovations was the pinnace, a surface made of animal hide used for painting scenic scenes, an early form of a scenic flat that was able to change the setting in the skene. Again, so the pinnaces, you can see them within the skene, below the Proskenion and above the Proskenion, set into the stage house. The ekaklima was a wagon-like scenic unit, and it was a device that rolled out in front of an audience to show horrible scenes, usually in tableau. Because as you'll read the plays, you'll notice that a lot of the major moments are described by messengers and not always seen. So, the idea of telling and not seeing within Greek theater. And then the machina was a crane which lowered actors and scenery from the roof to the stage floor. And we're going to stop right there. I'm going to make another video for you. I'm going to finish up Greeks and go on to the Romans. So watch the next video.